this call and we talk about abortion, if we speak about it in church, we're told we're too political. If we speak about it in the political arena, we're told we're too religious. If we speak about it in the world of the media, it's too disturbing. In the world of business, it's too distracting. In the world of education, it's too controversial. In the streets, it's too disruptive. So abortion, if abortion is wrong, where do we go to say so? We go into the churches, we go into politics, into the media, into business, into education, and into the streets. Some churches haven't wanted to get involved in political hassles with the government, so they've been silent on abortion. They didn't want to get involved in hassles from the government. They didn't want to take the fight to the government. So now with the HHS mandate, the government took the fight to them. And when it comes to that mandate, we've got a simple message. We will obey God rather than them. As Alveda can tell us, her uncle said one day to the civil rights movement, we've got a lot of obstacles in our way, but we're not going to let anything turn us around. We're not going to let no dogs turn us around, no water hoses turn us around, no police clubs or jail sentences, and we're not going to let any injunctions turn us around. And so today I say to you, in the pro-life movement, no Planned Parenthood is going to turn us around. No biased media is going to turn us around. No HHS mandate is going to turn us around. No Obama administration is going to turn us around. We are marching for a certainty. And it's not only the certainty that we will arrive at the day of victory for the unborn, it is a certainty that the power which now dismembers them and crushes them and throws them in the garbage is a power which at its roots has already been defeated.
Well, I'll tell you, Father Frank, it's amazing that we're actually sharing the stage with you. When Jason and I were kids, we met you in 1988.
Yes.
You look the exact same. He's got the same hair, the same glasses, and the same outfit. In 1991, that was the height of abortion. It was 2,197 freestanding abortion clinics in America. Today, thanks to the work of Priests for Life and other organizations and Christians and Catholics joining hands and uniting for life, there are less than 600 freestanding abortion clinics in America.
Well, good evening, friends. It's a great joy to be with you. Father Frank Pavone here, National Director of Priests for Life. Thanks for spending a few moments with me this evening, and thank you for all your encouraging comments. I've been seeing them as we've been warming up here to get on the program. John from Manila and Stuart, thank you for the three cheers. And someone else earlier was saying, thank you, Jesus, for using Father Frank to be a voice for the voiceless. Well, I say the same to you. Three cheers to all of you who are involved in the pro-life movement. Thank the Lord for using you to be a voice for the voiceless. We're all doing this together, and we are all on the road of victory in this great movement. We really are. We are making more progress than ever before in the minds and hearts of people, and also in public policies. There will always be setbacks. You know, the decision yesterday from the Supreme Court wasn't what it should have been, but it was also very narrow, and we have a presidential election coming up to continue to shift the balance of the Supreme Court in the right direction. Patience, perseverance, fortitude, keep your eyes focused on the prize, full speed ahead. So let's nourish ourselves by prayer with my book, Pro-Life Reflections for Every Day. Today's reflection comes from Psalm 27. Even if father and mother forsake me, the Lord will receive me. Reflection. Blessed Margaret of Castello from the 13th century is patroness of the unwanted. When her parents, who were respected nobility, discovered at her birth that she was a badly deformed dwarf, hunchback, and blind, they refused to give her a name. They locked her up in a small cell and eventually abandoned her while traveling. Had you and I been there, and had we known what Margaret's parents were doing to her, would we have spoken up? Let us pray. Blessed Margaret, pray that we may speak up for the unwanted in our times. Amen. Again, if you want a copy of this book, if you don't have it already, a little reflection and prayer like that for every day of the year, go to prolifereflectionsforeveryday.com. You know, I'm sitting here thinking the year is half over. Here we are on the last night of June of 2020. The year is half over already. It seems like it just began. Time flies in an incredibly fast way. I was just on a special conference call for the 2020 elections with the Trump campaign, and we were encouraging some local volunteers in various states. Brothers and sisters, now's the time to really step on the gas. Now's the time to really join hands, redouble our efforts. We offer you the opportunity to volunteer with us to do various activities for the election where you can make a difference. And the site to go to is prolifevolunteer.com. And we'll give you training. We'll give you things to do. prolifevolunteer.com. Now's the time to really give all our strength, all our effort to electing pro-life candidates. There are over 100,000 races that will be decided in the United States at every level of the federal and state governments in the elections of 2020. 100,000 races. Big task right on the horizon. But I'm going to talk to you about something different tonight. You know, the other day I was speaking with you and showed you these two books that are actually medical textbooks on how abortions are done. Now, it's always been my conviction that one of the things that's essential to ending abortion is exposing it, revealing it, ripping the mask off it, showing people what it actually is. And one of the ways to do that is to go to the medical textbooks written by the abortionists and show people what it is. Tell them what it is. Those who defend abortion don't describe abortion. It's one of the challenges we have to issue to them. Whether they're a friend of ours or an academician or a politician or whoever it is, and they're defending abortion. Our challenge to them is describe what you defend. And that's why I always get these abortion textbooks and read them. One time when I was years and years ago, when I first got this book, Abortion Practice, and I was reading through it, I was on a plane, and we had landed, and we were, at the gate, and we were waiting for them to open the door so we can go out. And I was standing there, and my bag in my hand, and I had this book in my hand like this, and I noticed somebody. I had my collar on, of course, and somebody next to me. I saw them looking at the title of the book, looking at me, looking at the book again. And so I started talking with them. I said, "Oh, don't worry. I have this book because I oppose abortion, and I'm learning, more about how it's performed for the purpose of stopping it, not for the purpose of doing it." But in any case, I wanted to read for you a few lines from this book. It's called Second Trimester Abortion, Perspectives After a Decade of Experience. And there's a chapter in here called How Much is a Fetus Worth? Interesting question, isn't it, for an abortion textbook? How much is a fetus worth? And there are two lines here that I marked in the margin because they especially caught my attention as very useful. Listen to what this abortion textbook says. Conception is the only occasion in the whole course of events when something happens during a brief moment of time that is truly momentous. Those shady gradations, represented by terms like implantation, embryo, fetus, quickening, and viability, are difficult to understand. Even delivery and breathing do not represent a profound modification in the fetus as much as a change in situ, in other words, in location, and an adjustment in physiology, for example, how they take in oxygen. How different is the fetus 10 minutes before parturition and 10 minutes after? That is different in a way that would affect its value. Okay. Fascinating, right? In a book about abortion. Notice what is being said here about conception. Some people will try to justify abortion by saying, look, there is no step at which human life begins. Human life is continuous. And then they'll say things like, well, you're against killing the embryo or the fetus, but, you don't have problems killing sperms and eggs. Sperms are alive, eggs are alive. Well, we know that they are living cells. But what is the end point of the development of a sperm or an ovum? They remain a sperm and an ovum, don't they? I mean, to the fullness of their capacity to grow, that's as far as they get. It's only when they combine in the process of fertilization that a new organism begins with a new trajectory that, when allowed to proceed without interruption or destruction, ends up in what you're looking at right now and whom I'm talking to right now. It ends up as exactly like we are. We were once that newly conceived life. We were once that zygote, that embryo. That was us, not something that we had, not a part of us, not something that became us. It was us at our earliest stages of development. Sure, the sperm is alive, and the newly fertilized life is alive, but they're two different organisms and two different trajectories and two different fulfillments of what they are. When was it determined that you would be male or female? When was it determined what color your eyes would be? When was every genetic characteristic that you have determined? Well, it was determined at fertilization. And that's biology. That's not religious doctrine. This textbook on how to do abortions admits this. Let me read again that sentence. Conception is the only occasion in the whole course of events when something happens during a brief moment of time that is truly momentous. Why is it truly momentous? Because of all the new things that are being decided. Because of the fact that an organized, integral, living being, an organism, is starting at that point. It's starting its trajectory of growth. Those genetic characteristics set in place at that moment continue until natural death, however many years later, 80, 90 years later. Same organism, same characteristics, same genetic code. It's conception that you have the truly momentous change. The other changes in the various phases of development in the womb, and even at the point of birth, are no more of a change in who that organism or what that organism is than the changes in puberty and aging and any other stage of life. It's all a process of change, development, and growth. But the only time that the inherent design of the organism truly changes is when it first comes to be in the process of fertilization. Now, the book goes on to say this. Surely embryos, let me back up. Those who view the soul as referring primarily to function, who maintain that humanness signifies the ability to do something more than man's brute neighbors do, to reason, to choose, to become creatively accountable, are the ones in real trouble with the abortion issue. Now, you notice what this person is saying. This author is saying that there are some, and you may have heard them in, discussions or arguments you've had about abortion, who will say, well, yes, there's a physical organism there. I can see that the science says it starts with fertilization, but it can't think, and it can't talk, and it's not aware, and it can't reason. Okay, so this is the argument. They'll say, well, when does it become human? Well, not based on the biology or the genetics, but based on the ability to have a relationship or have a conversation. Okay, so that's what some of these people think. It's rather arbitrary to say that, but that's what a lot of people think. Okay, so listen to what, again, this textbook on abortion goes on to say about that. Okay, so to reason, to choose, to become creatively accountable. Surely embryos and fetuses do none of those things. In fact, neither do newborns. And there's the rub. Presumably, it would be equally as acceptable to destroy newborns as fetuses, since both are in the same pre-human boat. Infanticide would be permissible as feticide, and feticide would be practicable ethically, if not medically, in any trimester. This recalls for me the words of Peter Singer, an ethicist, quote unquote, but avid promoter of abortion and even infanticide, because Singer once made the very same point, and he said it this way. There are ultimately only two consistent positions to take. Either oppose abortion or endorse infanticide. Why did he say it that way? Think about it. Either oppose abortion or endorse infanticide. Because the same reasons that many people give as to why they don't deem the embryo or fetus, the baby in the womb, to be human or worthy of protection are reasons that would apply to the newborn. Not only in terms of this argument that the author raises about function, Well, he can't reason. Well, he can't think. Well, the baby can't talk in the womb. Well, can the newborn? How was your latest conversation with the newborn? But also in terms of the external reasons why one would want to have an abortion. Just think about the pregnant mother for a moment who is afraid of giving birth to this child because she says, I'm too young to raise a baby. Or let's say she goes through the pregnancy and then the baby is born. Is she still too young the day after the birth to raise the baby? Let's say she doesn't have any money, doesn't have any job, doesn't have any income. Let's say the baby gets born. On the day after the baby is born, does she have more money, more income? Let's say she already has too many children. So if that's an argument for killing the baby in the womb, let's say the baby gets born. On the day the baby's born, does she still have too many children? She actually has more if you only consider birth as the starting point. Well then, how are all these arguments not still valid on the day after the birth of the baby? It doesn't work, in other words. What we're saying, and also what abortion advocates like the author of this book are saying, is that using birth as the dividing line simply doesn't work. In other words, in fact, using any point in the development of the baby in the womb, using any point as a transition from non-humanness to humanness doesn't work either. It's all arbitrary. It's all based on different people's philosophical thought, or even no thought at all. It's just an arbitrary, it's like shooting a dart onto a board. The only truly momentous event, the only thing that really changes the organism itself that is living in the womb, it's not birth. That's not a change in the organism, simply a change in the location and the way that he or she processes oxygen and food. But it's fertilization. And these, the words of the book, Second Trimester Abortion. So I thought I would share that with you tonight, just friends, a little bit of encouragement in your own thinking and talking about this important issue. If any of you have some questions that you want to ask or thoughts that you want to share, I've been seeing the comments coming in, and I'd be happy to respond to some of them. Let's take a look at, okay, Leanne, I will pray for your daughter who has left the church and professes to believe in abortion. Yes, it is sad. It's not necessarily something that's going to last. You know, life experiences change people. Never doubt that. And you know what often changes people? The birth of a friend's baby, perhaps a pregnancy of their own. Maybe it's a sad event in life that really shakes them up or triggers them. You know, even having lived through now, as we all have, this pandemic and also all the unrest and the riots and violence in cities around the United States. Sometimes world events like this really shake people up and help them to reevaluate, you know, what is the role of faith in my life? What is the value of life? So I will join you in prayer for her, and never lose hope, never lose confidence, and never lose confidence not only in the grace of God, but in the good foundation that you have put in place in raising your daughter. And I know that we spoke. I know that many of you are in that same category as we speak about this. So I struggle with the moment of conception. Well, it's actually a process. It's not one moment, but there is an identifiable scientific process. You're saying it's impossible to define. Well, not really impossible, because again, embryologists have done so. And this is where we rely not on philosophy. We're talking here pure biology. And, you know, we speak about a moment of conception. We talk about the combining of the genetic material. There are actually many moments within that process. But my friend, it is an identifiable process. And we know that it's an identifiable process because we can recreate the process outside the womb. In other words, if we didn't know exactly what conception was, we wouldn't be able to have test tube babies. And I'm not saying that that's something we should do. In fact, it's something we shouldn't do. But the fact that we can do it, that we know how to do it, means, and furthermore, the fact that we can do all sorts of, the fact that science can begin experimenting with chimeras, in other words, taking the genetic material that combines in the process. I agree with you that, the moment is, it's better to speak of the process of conception. But again, it's an identifiable process because, scientifically, again, it crosses some ethical boundaries when you start doing this. But scientists can begin combining genetic material and experimenting with what might happen in those cases. But even just saying the existence of in vitro fertilization, yes, we know very, very concretely what conception is. And it's important for us to not confuse the scientific with the philosophical. The philosophical, you can have a really hard time defining things. And a lot of it is going to be just subject to varying opinion. But science itself is quite another thing. And we really do need to spend more time digging into the embryology of all of this, because we're living at a time in human history when we know more about that than ever before. So, Patricia, let's see what you have to say. No matter what pro-lifers say, the pro-abortionists will always say it's still a woman's choice. What are my thoughts about that? Well, first of all, I point out to them that's contrary to fact. The person getting the abortion is not normally saying it's my choice. She's saying I have no choice. She feels desperate, trapped, afraid, out of options, despairing. And that's what's driving people to get abortions. And we know that, of course, in working with these people every day and working with the thousands of pregnancy centers across the country, which we do. And I teach at their conferences, and I counsel and work with them and visit the centers and counsel women myself. And then working with those that have had abortions, as we do in our Rachel's Vineyard program and our Silent No More campaign. They didn't want to do what they did. They didn't feel free and empowered. They felt exactly the opposite of that. So contrary to fact is one thing. But if you think about it just philosophically, then we can say, well, look, you can talk about any act of violence that way. The guy who shot somebody on the street, well, that's his choice. The person who stabbed somebody or abused their child, God forbid, or committed any kind of violent act or any kind of violation of another person's rights. In one sense, if we just want to define it as someone else's choice, well, you could do that with any act of violence. That doesn't mean it's not an act of violence. And that's what we need to point out to people. When they use that argument, to the extent that that argument would justify abortion, what we have to point out to people is it proves too much. It proves way too much. Because then you could say, well, it's just a woman's choice to kill the newborn, too, if she wants to do that, because she doesn't want to be a mother or have the responsibility of raising a child. So I hope that's helpful to you. That's one of the ways we have to respond to that. Father, our next friend is asking here, why is the church not fighting for pro-life with one loud voice? Well, I'll tell you what I think one of the reasons is, and I was just reading about it before I came in here tonight to do this broadcast. A bishop out in the Midwest disciplined one of his priests, sidelined him actually, took him out of the active ministry because the priest was talking about issues that were divisive. Give me a break, right? What? The gospel of Jesus Christ is divisive. Jesus Christ was crucified for saying that he was God. So I don't understand these religious leaders who they don't want to say anything divisive. That's ridiculous. Jesus said, I have come for division. So, this is one of the reasons why, and here's the irony, because what you're saying is 1,000% right. We need to be united in our voice for life. And one of the key reasons why, as a church, we are not uniting in our voice for life, because we're afraid that we'll offend some people. And ironically, the very fear of dividing people, of having people get angry and walk away or complain against us, the very fear of that happening ends up making us divided because our voice is no longer loud and clear and united. What unites us is the truth on which the church rests. What unites us is the truth of the gospel, the truth of the moral law, the imperative to defend life. That is what is supposed to unite us. So you're completely right, and I think that this exaggerated fear of offending people, and we always have to all be nice, is really getting in the way of a strong, united voice for life. Carmen is saying, I'm really disappointed in the justice who voted to strike down the case in the Louisiana law yesterday. Me too. A lot of people are very, very disappointed at the Chief Justice, John Roberts. And here's the irony, that 4 years ago, the Supreme Court, in a case called Whole Women's Health versus Hellerstedt, we're dealing with a very similar law in Texas as what Louisiana passed, the law requiring abortionists to have hospital admitting privileges. And the court struck down that law. However, Justice Roberts was in the minority and he was defending the law. He was saying, yeah, this law is constitutional. But because the decision of the court was to strike it down, in this case, he looked at the law and he said, well, it's the same law as Texas did, so I don't want to change, I don't want to have the court flip its opinion. That was his rationale. And our response to it, which Justice Thomas articulated in his dissent, is, yeah, but if our decision in the other case was wrong, we should correct it. And not only that, but even though the laws were practically identical, the cases were not, because other circumstances made Louisiana's situation different. But in any case, it's a big disappointment because, you know, had Justice Roberts voted on this law the way he did on the other one, we would have won the case. But we're making progress. The two oldest justices on the court are both on the left wing of the court. We've got to work hard, as I was saying before, to make sure that the person who names their replacements is Donald Trump and not someone on the Democrat side. Okay, any other questions that we can answer here? Let's see what Cheryl is saying. Many years ago, the parish where I grew up gave us a paper survey at Mass. That's interesting, asking if we supported euthanasia or not. Then it stated clearly the church's position. I wish a survey related to abortion was given us and then preached about at the pulpit. Yeah, that would be a very interesting exercise to do and see where the people come down on this. The reality is, of course, that the more a person practices his or her faith and goes, and that includes, of course, going to church on Sundays, the more a person practices their faith, the more they tend to be pro-life. And but still, of course, even in church, we've got people who are not, or people who are, you know, confused on the issue. And I've had the privilege all these 27 years and counting that I've been leading Priests for Life, of speaking in different parishes every weekend on the abortion issue for all this time, not just on the weekend, but all during the week as well. And so many times after Mass, church-going Catholics came up to me and said, wow, you know, you really changed my views on this issue. And I always remember one time when I was preaching about a sign that I saw here in Florida. We see them along the beach, about the sea turtles. And it says the sea turtles are protected by local, state, and federal law. And so I said in the homily, if we don't have the right to choose to smash the egg of a sea turtle, why do we have the right to choose to smash a baby? And one woman comes out of church and says, I came in here to church today completely pro-abortion. And now I'm completely pro-life. And what changed my mind was the sea turtles. So we do have people sitting there in church who are very pro-abortion, but they can be changed. And the fact that they're worshiping and listening to the word of the Lord and saying praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ, when they hear the gospel means that there's a certain openness there, my friends, to hearing God's truth. And that should be an encouragement to us, the priests, to be preaching God's truth, including his truth about abortion. Barbara, thank you for your comment. I see the upcoming presidential election as being one of life versus death. Trump is pro-life and Biden is pro-choice. You said it perfectly. That's exactly what it is. The president has said many, many times, every child, he has used the word every child is made in the sacred image of God. He has called on Congress to end late-term abortion. And the reason he focuses on that is not because it's the final goal, but because it's the first step. That Congress is ready and willing the Republicans, that is, to stop late-term abortion. The Democrats don't want to have anything to do with ending abortion. But the point is that when you say the president is pro-life, he certainly is. He has done more. He has done more for the unborn than any other president so far. And then talk about Joe Biden. Not only is he pro-choice, there is not a single restriction on abortion that he supports. And so it's like, he has become as extreme as all the rest of them. He doesn't want to protect any of these babies. And really, people should ask him. People should really ask him. People should challenge him. All of us need to challenge not only Joe Biden, but all the other Democrat candidates. Look at your congressional races. The whole House of Representatives is up for election, and look at your Senate races. Those of you that have U.S. Senate races going on, ask the Democrat candidates, what restrictions on abortion do you support? And if you can ask them that publicly, if there's town hall gatherings or even online gatherings where people can see your comments and maybe they'll take your question. Of course, they try to avoid these questions. But my friends, when we ask them that question and we let others hear the answer, or if you write to them and they write back to you, share with your fellow voters, share with your fellow citizens the answer to the question. Because I'm telling you, these Democrats, they do not want any restrictions on abortion. The party platform doesn't have any restrictions on abortion. Oh, here and there you'll find some that'll say, oh, well, it shouldn't happen in the latest stages of pregnancy. But they're the exception, not the norm. So if we show people how extreme the party is, a lot of voters will say, well, I'm only going to vote for someone that shares my position on abortion because it's such a fundamental issue. It's life and death, like you said. And yes, so you're exactly right. This election very much is a choice between life and death. So let's see, what other questions do we have? The two of them running the nation. Yeah, what a disaster, right? Biden and Pelosi. What do we tell the pro-choicers who bring up the subject of cases of incest? How do we approach that question? Well, we approach it this way. We show the greatest compassion for those who are victims of incest. We agree with the person who's raising the question, right? Because the reason they're raising that question is that those are victims and they do deserve our greatest compassion. They do deserve all the kind of help, all the help that they need, all the help that will truly help them. And then that's how we address the abortion part of the question. Because if we can agree that person, that victim of incest, needs all the help that will help them, the question becomes, will abortion help them? And the answer to that is clearly no. Victims of sexual assault, whether it's incest or other forms of sexual assault, are usually not the ones who bring up the idea of abortion. It's other people around them that think that this would be a good solution. But we have to understand that abortion brings another trauma, that the incest, the sexual assault, is bad enough. Why would we want to then further hurt that person with another trauma like having them kill their own child? And we know this because of the experience that we have in counseling these people. And there is one book that was written quite a few years ago that talks about a couple of studies of those who were victims of sexual assault and conceived a child, and then some had abortions, some brought the child to term. That the book is called Victims and Victors. Victims and Victors. And the findings of these studies were that, those who had the abortion ended up being in counseling and suffering more from the abortion than from the sexual assault. And meanwhile, you bring that child to birth, you love that child, the child loves you back. That's not a negative, that's a positive. There's love there, there's healing there, and many people have been able to do it. Okay, what states have been determined to be critical swing states that need phone banking to help reelect the president? Well, every state is going to be important, every state. But in particular, you look at Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Florida, North Carolina. These are some of the top key states for the presidential race this year, this time around. Now, there's a lot still to happen with this election. A lot. The conventions haven't happened yet. The debates haven't happened yet. Biden hasn't even chosen his running mate yet. There's a lot yet to happen. There's only, in one sense, it's a very short time, 4 months. But in political time, especially nowadays, when, the whole race can change with one person sending one tweet on a little device like this in the span of 5 seconds. Or one person grabbing one video and uploading it to YouTube in the span of 15 seconds. Can change the entire dynamic of a national political race. But those states I mentioned are among the ones that are most key. And I thank you for asking that, David, because it gives me a chance now to remind all of you once again, if you want to make phone calls, and we'll give you the script. It's not, you don't have to be, you don't have to be an expert on any of these issues. You don't have to argue or debate with anybody. But people making phone calls to pre-selected voters who are persuadable, who maybe just need a reminder, who need encouragement. You call, you're given a script, you're given an app actually, and you're asked to help make the call. We need help like that. ProLifeVolunteer.com is the place where you can find a little sign-up form. This is ours, and we'll direct you to various different ways that you can help with this election. But phone calls are very important, and those are some, not all, some of the very key states. The president really, the first time around, what put him over the top were those wins in Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania, and they weren't by very large margins, but that brought him the Electoral College victory. Patricia's asking an interesting question. Let's go ahead and take that one. Have you heard the conjecture that Trump may not run for another term? I will completely ignore that. This is a man who's determined to win, knows how to win, and he's a real fighter. There's going to be a lot of psychological warfare between now and Election Day. You remember what happened last time around. My goodness, right up until Election Day, it was like, oh, it's impossible for President Trump to win. It's impossible. It's impossible. He didn't drop out then. He's not going to drop out now. He's only just begun. He really has. The campaign is strong, confident, well organized, and we've got the momentum. We've got the momentum in so many ways. We've got a much bigger enthusiasm on our side. If you look at polling related to enthusiasm, we've got the enthusiasm on our side. We just got to keep on working. We've got to keep our eyes fixed on what we can do. And there's a plenty that we can do. There's a lot of things in elections that we have no control over. We have no control over this craziness with this pandemic or these riots going on, and all these things can affect the electoral race. But friends, focus on what you can do, and that goes back to David's point before. You can make phone calls. You can help us get the message out online. You can help to educate other voters, sending emails, posting things on social media, all over and over. Go to prolifevolunteer.com and get involved. Let's work on this together. Very important question, DJ Kern. How important are local elections for pro-life? Extremely important for a couple of reasons. First of all, local elections are, let's say, for example, city council or mayor. There are things going on in cities where abortion clinics are operating. Even school board elections are important for pro-life. Will Planned Parenthood be allowed to come into the school? The school board has authority over that. Mayor and city council, what will pro-life protesters be able to do in front of the abortion clinic? I had to testify in the course of my travels. I've testified at city council meetings about the activities of the local pro-life activists in front of the abortion facilities, because the city can either make it very hard or very easy for the protesters to go out there and save lives. So there's that. There is, there are zoning laws, that will determine whether an abortion clinic can even open up in a particular city. So local elections, in fact, the city of Albuquerque, New Mexico, some years ago even had its own referendum on late-term abortion in the city. Now, the pro-lifers didn't succeed in that. But on the other hand, the fact that they did it was a great success in raising awareness about the late-term abortions that go on there in Albuquerque. And, it just goes to show, even at the most local level, pro-life progress can be made because you know what? Abortions happen locally. The other dimension to that is that's where politicians get their start a lot of the times. Unless you're Donald Trump, you just jump right into the presidency. But most of the time, politicians start at the local level. They get their feet wet, they get into public office, and then they start rising through the different levels of government. So let's let the pro-life ones get the start. Let's let them start climbing up the ladder as pro-life candidates. Let's start electing them at every level of government. And finally, it's a matter of character, isn't it? I mean, your position on abortion says a whole lot about your entire moral worldview. As I always say, if a politician can't respect the life of a little baby, how's he going to respect yours or mine? All right, there's a lot of great questions and comments going on here. Let's see where Grace is saying, know who your local government is. That's so important. A lot of people, it's amazing that we don't even know our state legislators. What state legislative district are you in for the Senate, the state Senate? What state legislative district are you in for the state House? It's amazing how many people don't know these things. We need to get to know our local government. Meet with your state legislators. They're easier to access than your federal legislators. Not that we shouldn't meet with our federal legislators too, but it's a lot harder. And meet with your mayor, meet with your members of your city council. Get to know who these people are. Anita, Father, thank you for keeping us informed in a positive way, giving us hope for our country. Yes, indeed. We need to have hope. We need to encourage each other with that hope, because then that is going to lead to a lot of good action. Carmen is saying, Father, we are so divided, and that worries me. The Democrats keep trying to keep us home so they can try and cheat with mail-in ballots and cheat in November's election. This is a very important issue. when we say mail-in ballots, now we're not talking here about the very legitimate practice of absentee ballots. If you know you're not going to be able to get to the polls in person, you can and should get your absentee ballot and mail it in. But the difference here with what Carmen is saying and what this traditional absentee ballot process is the difference between the voter going to the Board of Elections and saying, here I am, here's who I am, here's where I live, I want my ballot by mail. Please send it to me so I can fill it in and send it back. That's one thing. But the mail-in ballot process that a lot of Democrats are pushing is that the state automatically mails out the ballots themselves, the ballots on which you will choose your candidate. The state will send out the ballots ahead of time to all the voters, whether they've asked for them or not. So here's the actual ballots going out, right? The people that haven't even requested them. Well, where are they ending up? Sure, will most of them arrive at most of the addresses? Yeah, but where are they ending up? All of them. Mistakes are going to be made. Data mistakes. I mean, we have stories already coming to us of as the concern about this rises, of apartment numbers through data errors, apartment numbers being left off, and then all of a sudden you've got all these ballots circulating to God knows where. Who's you send them out like that, people are capable of intercepting them, or they arrive somewhere that people have died, people have moved, people get two ballots because one is under their old name and one is under their new name, one is under their old address, one is under their new address. There are a lot of various things that can go wrong. And then with all the ballots coming back, you've got all these different people handling them along the way. There's much more room for error and fraud. You go to the polling place, the ballot is put in your hands, you fill it out, and then you bring it to that scanner machine and you see it go in. Nobody else has intercepted your ballot. Now, obviously, there are other people involved in the process. There have to be. But it's a far cry from hundreds of thousands or millions of ballots just going out, proactively in the mail. We've got to fight against this. We've got to insist on tighter controls. One of the things you can do locally is check with your Board of Elections, check with your local political parties. How can you help with the election? And people are able to be poll watchers, et cetera, et cetera. Thank you, Leslie. And I know someone before you said the same thing about getting encouraged again when we have our conversations. That's why we want to do this. It is very, very important and essential that we encourage each other. And the more we pay attention to the experts on our side of the equation, so to speak, okay, the more we will be encouraged. And as we go along here with these broadcasts each day, I'm going to be recommending to you some good books to read. And one of them, let me mention one of them. The title of it is For God and Country. It's a book that came out this year, For God and Country, by Ralph Reed. Ralph Reed is one of our nation's top political experts. He's an evangelical. He's a strong pro-life man. We work together in a number of capacities. And he came out with this great book called For God and Country. The subtitle is The Christian Case for Trump. And it is Ralph Reed, R-E-E-D. Check it out on Amazon. Get yourself a copy. It's a great, encouraging book to read for this election. And I'll have a number of other recommendations for you in the coming days. Well, this has been a lot of fun. I thank you for your comments and your questions and your prayers and your suggestions and your encouragement. It's mutual. So let me give you a blessing, and then we'll talk to you again in the morning. We'll be doing our Mass. Oh, tomorrow morning we actually, tomorrow morning we have Alvita King going to be with me at 9:30 in the morning. Then I'll have the Mass at 10, and then we'll have our other daily broadcasts, and I'll again join you in the evening. So may the Lord bless you. May He fill you with His Holy Spirit, answer all your prayers, protect you and your loved ones, and make you strong defenders of the unborn. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Father Frank Pavone here of Priests for Life. Remember to support us. We're at prolifegift.org. You can help us to do our work. We rely only on you. I know many of you are already donors to Priests for Life, but check out prolifegift.org if you aren't, and we appreciate your generosity. God bless you. We'll talk to you tomorrow.